My name is Frank Balonis. I'm the chairman of the American Business Council, AmCham Kuwait. I welcome all of you with us today. For those of you that know me, know I often talk about security issues and things like that. But the interesting thing is there's a few things that apply to every single one of us. And this is that subject, cybersecurity. When we talk about national security, we talk about corporate security, we talk about individual security. In such a connected world today, there is no subject more important than the one we're having today. So I would like to welcome you all to today's panel discussion on data loss protection, cybersecurity, and best practices in Kuwait, supported by CITRA and the U.S. Kuwait Business Council. We would like to give a special welcome to them and to the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait. Tonight, we have a great panel of amazing, esteemed guests, and I'm very, very happy to see all of them with us today because I've been looking forward to the discussion for some time now. Today, we have Mohammed Al-Tora, Chief Market Regulations and Competition at CITRA, Vivek Joshi, Deputy Counselor of Economic Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, Alan Sanchez, EMEA CISO for Fortinet, Majid Aber, National Technology Officer at Microsoft Kuwait, Ayed Al-Qatar, Technical Solutions Architect at Cisco, Faisal Al-Ali, Enterprise Risk Management Manager at Zain Kuwait. This discussion will be moderated by Dana Winter, who is a cybersecurity policy and certified system security professional. This panel discussion is brought to you today by our very own IT and cybersecurity focus group. That's part of our American Business Council, AmCham Kuwait here. We're very, very proud to have Dana as part of our team and doing all of these things with us. So with that, I would like to once again thank all of you panelists, all of you participating with us today. And Dana, I thank you as well, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Frank. Thank you for leading and guiding the AmCham Kuwait and for helping us all to get together and to share very valuable information with each other that helps us in our Kuwait-US relationship. The event today is brought to us by the AmCham Kuwait IT and Cybersecurity Focus Group, and all of the members of the focus group have supported this meeting today. I'd like to introduce the subject with just a few words, and we're going to keep our eyes on the time today and move quickly through our subject. People will be able to follow up with us and to get more in detail information as they need to. In the IBM sponsored 2020 Cost of Data Breach Report, Ponemon Institute interviewed 3,200 knowledgeable individuals in 524 organizations spread across 17 countries and 17 industries that experienced data breaches between August 2019 and April 2020. The estimated total cost of a data breach averaged nearly $4 million in 2019 and 2020. This global estimated average does not tell the whole story. For example, healthcare average data breach costs are more than $7 million per breach. And the energy sector is in second place with with the average breach costing nearly $5 million. So I start with that in order to emphasize to people, this is a business issue. This can be a very costly business issue. I guess everybody is aware of the Colonial pipeline breach that we suffered in US in about last month. So many of our breaches, for example, here in the region, we don't hear about because we don't have that degree of transparency. So we don't really know what's going on. Now, what is our subject today? The core principles of cybersecurity are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. um, data loss prevention is of 6 types: loss of productivity, response costs, cost of replacement, fines and judgment fees, loss of competitive advantage, and reputational damage. So tonight, the panel is going to help us to have a better understanding of the subject of data loss prevention, data protection, how is it related to cybersecurity, and any specific details of how we can better respond to threats and strengthen our vulnerabilities here, specifically in Kuwait. So I'll be going through the panel one by one with each of the questions. I've asked the panelists to keep their responses very precise and short, 1 to 2 minutes, because we have 6 panelists and we have 1 hour to cover 6 questions. So I will call on each panelist, for each question, I will call on a different person as the first panelist, so that each person will have the chance to be the first responder to the question. So question number 1 is, who in the organization is responsible for cybersecurity and therefore data loss prevention? Now, actually, you could answer that differently if you different people. So let's begin this question with Elaine Sanchez, and then we'll follow with Vivek Joshi. Is Vivek here? I haven't seen his name yet in the participants. Yes, he's here. Excellent. We'll start with Elaine, Vivek, Mohammed Toura, Majid Aber, Ayed Al-Karta, and Faisal Al-Ali, in that order. So that's Elaine, Vivek, Mohammed Al-Toura, Majid, Ayed, and Faisal, in that order. So Alan, over to you. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, Dan, thank you so much for this question about who is actually responsible. I would say perhaps a long time ago, because, you know, in our world, 5 to 7 years are a geological era. It seems that more than centuries. Maybe a while ago, you could say there was a department in charge of cybersecurity. Locating this department was the person who reported to the person who reported to the person who potentially was the equivalent of what we call today the CIO. But now, cybersecurity is more than just a technology. It is a mission. It is a mission that is to make our hyper-connected world a safer place. So it's like citizenship in a country. It's not only the head and the chief of state. It's not only even the Ministry of Inner Affairs. It's not only the police. It is every citizen that needs to have in herself and in himself a little nugget of cybersecurity citizenship. And that is what we call the human firewall. When you see something, say something. You remember what in the UK, when there were these horrible things happening, the idea that everyone's eye could be part of securing the country. And I would say our job is to rally the rest of the company and our partners and our customers to the cause of cybersecurity. Because it's a complex world that we are dealing with. Takes the beauty of this conference. There is a video stream and an audio stream that probably go from this platform to the cloud, from the cloud to every single PC of every of these persons. It is a complex ecosystem. It is an ecosystem that is all the more performing that it is becoming complex. So one man, one department the equivalent of one cyber police could not do it all. And I frankly think that, for instance, what we witness today with the American Chamber of Commerce and the country of Kuwait working together with people like us, with these eminent members of this panel, we are the ecosystem. We are the fellowship of cybersecurity, and it is our global responsibility to imagine, to design, to deploy, to maintain, and communicate cybersecurity as a must-do in order to keep this world safe from a digital perspective.
Thank you, Alan. And now I'll call on Vivek Joshi from the US Embassy. Vivek, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Dana. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. It's an impressive group of people, and thank you for allowing me to participate. I agree with what Alan just said. I think the responsibility of security is both on individual as well as on collective basis. When it comes to organization, and perhaps Alan was talking with the perspective of a private company. I represent the U.S. government, and so what I have to contribute is, yes, at a governmental level, we do need some sort of an umbrella organization to look at, to analyze cyber issues on a global basis. But at the same time, government consists, for example, the federal government in the United States consists of over 3 million employees. And so the responsibility of protecting data, of taking measures to make sure that there are no data leaks, there is no data loss prevention, data losses and things like that, is on an individual basis. As you correctly pointed out somewhere in your narrative, that every incident begins with an individual who may accidentally do something or intentionally do something. But I think so the responsibility falls on both the collective as well as the individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vivek. Now I'd like to turn to Mohammed Al-Tura from Citra.
Thank you, Dana. I cannot agree more with both gentlemen. As an introduction, cyber business, it's everyone business in any organization, across any nation. It's like protecting your economy and nation and national security as well. So everybody has to contribute to it. So make it more resilient. So if I'm talking about from a government point of view, of course, the government is responsible to make sure the whole nation understands the cyber effects that can happen to the nation in different messages, of course. So you can see the trends that's happening lately about a national cyber strategy, and you will find in every national cyber strategy there is a huge effort for awareness, so that it makes people aware. That would reduce the problem proactively. As we see now, the way that the cyber actors are coming is very advanced, and they're changing so fast, and they're coming from different methodologies as well, that to us, it's a mission, it's an ongoing issue that we have to always have to step up the challenge and take those initiatives to the people, to the corporates, to the entire country ecosystem, to ensure that they are resilient. And of course, the government regulation for the critical infrastructure, it's extremely important to set the resilience for the nation. So it's everyone business. It has to be definitely from a national perspective, and everyone that lives in that ecosystem depends on whether they are individuals or IT pros or organizations that's critical, definitely they have to be aware of of the cyber and how they become resilient. So that's I can put a short answer for this, but behind this there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. And now let's turn to Majid Alber.
Thank you so
hello,
much.
Majid.
Hello, how are you? And thank you all. Again, I agree 100% with my esteemed colleagues here. And usually the first answer comes to mind is the CISO or the Information Security Department. But as mentioned, this is truly everyone's role and everyone's job, just like as a citizen and your duties as a citizen. This comes here. But I'd like to take a little bit of a different spin on it. In distinguishing between accountability and responsibility. I think if we look at who's accountable, yes, there has to be a specific party that is in the end accountable and that's driving this. But again, the responsibility is across the board. But if we look, for example, into most of the breaches, we will find that at one point, there was some hint from the Information Security Department or what have you, that something may be going on. So the issue is, why was this not followed up on? What stopped this from being action being taken? So I think this is where we look at the barrier to success. So I would say the person who is responsible would be the entity in the organization that can best enact on recommendations by the Information Security Department. So that to ensure, no red flags, no hints, no concerns go unattended to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Majid. Now let's turn to Ayed Al-Karta from Cisco.
Yes, thank you, Dana, and it's a pleasure to be part of this webinar. This is a great question. Now, when it comes to cybersecurity, I totally agree with the esteemed panelists that it's everyone's job. From in the organization, from the normal users all the way to the board. It's not a technical discussion, it's a business discussion before it's technical. It's part of the business. And we, as the IT, the community within the organization, everyone has a role, from the data owner to the custodian, to the system owners, to the CISO, to the boards, in order to make sure we protect the data. Now, it's not only within the organization, we also take cybersecurity and safety to our homes. It's our job to protect the online safety of our kids, of our families, and to make sure they are protected from online threats. Now, I'd like to comment on the breaches side. With all the breaches that we are witnessing around the world, cybersecurity is a critical part of the conversation, because at the end of the day, it affects the reputation of the organization. There will be financial damages, reputation, and affecting businesses. Now, if you look at the latest reports and statistics since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the threat actors capitalize on this and started to come up with new ways to go after victims, whether to use COVID-19 themed phishing attacks or social engineering combined with social engineering tricks, in order to compromise systems, to steal data, to ask for ransom payments. So it is a very hot subject nowadays. Every day you wake up on certain incidents or breaches around the world, and it's getting more attention at different levels, at the organization level, at the government's level, around the world, to make sure the safety and cybersecurity of the society is taken care of.
Thank you very much, Ayed. And now finally, let's hear from Faisal Al-Ali from Zain.
Hi, Dana. Thank you guys very much for allowing me to speak over here. And I do agree with most of the guys here. It is the responsibility, as Mr. Allen said, of every single individual. However, it's also the responsibility of the, let's call it the cybersecurity department or the CISO, to enable the people to have the certain tools and necessary tools to actually fight the data loss that happens around the world, whether it's in, I mean, in the multiple sectors. Also, Mr. Mohammed Tora mentioned a very critical point, which is awareness. So I cannot hold anybody responsible and give him the responsibility without actually giving him the tools to be responsible. And these tools are awareness and conducting, let's say, quarterly or, I mean, every couple of months we conduct, let's say, an awareness here in the auditorium, just an example. So my point here is, yes, everybody is responsible. However, we as cybersecurity personnel, we should be leading this and making sure that every individual gets the necessary information to fight such a thing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Faisal. And now for the second question, I'm just going to ask for a quick round on the subject of budget and go through the panel rather quickly on this subject so that we have more time for the questions that come after this one. But this is still a very important subject for people to get some guidelines on it. What is your recommended data loss protection, data loss prevention, budget percentage of the total budget of the corporation or the organization? Do you have a rule of thumb for the amount of money that you think is necessary these days as a percentage of the corporate budget? And do you have any specific line items that you think are the most important ones? For this question, we can start with Mr. Vivek Joshi from US Embassy.
So again, thank you. Thank you for the question. I really don't have any idea as to what percentage the budget should be, but I can certainly say that the budget is inversely proportional to the education and awareness that we all talked about. I think the higher the level of awareness, the lower the budget. And I think it has a direct economic impact in terms of how much the organization should be spending on a certain things. I mean, of course, there are going to be some basic costs, fixed costs, but at the same time, I think higher the awareness, the lower the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vivek. Mohammed Al-Tura, would you give us some guidelines on this subject?
That's a very, very good question, and you're probably going to get different answer. The way I would look at it from two angles. There's an angle called classical IT, which we presume that we have a big data centers on-premise, and the control cost of that environment, it's a very big challenge to keep the total cost of ownership contained and try to reduce. And that environment do exist everywhere in the world. And there's some, when you get this environment, then definitely the budget to secure this environment, to sustain it, it's going to be a challenge for organization. So what I would do, I would extract the important data and make sure they have a understanding of where the critical data of the organization is, and think about putting our investment first to protect this data. And that's going to be a challenge because you have to sustain, secure the infrastructure, secure the apps, make a huge awareness across the organization. And that will take some time as well. Where on the other side, there is now a digital transformation hype happening in the industry. That's by DNA, it should reduce the cost of running the IT in the organization, given the fact that you can use a secured public clouds to secure your information, and the providers of the cloud, such like we have a Microsoft here, where we're very famous, in this business, where they can take, the infrastructure cost from you because they provide it for you. So your budget will be much more reduced to sustain your IT and advance it and secure it as well. So there are two schools of thoughts. If you look at Bahrain model, since the country decided to go digital transformation, so the entire national strategy and approach for the cyber is based on that as well. It's a different approach, requires different capacity development. And of course, if you think about it, it is the way now, it is the trend. So that's important to see. There is a big relationship between the success of the cyber journey, with digital transformation versus a classical IT and cyber success. So that's something that I'm sure every country is thinking about it, but I'm just trying to differentiate between both. And when you go to the cloud environment, to secure your data will be much easier burden and budget, given that the infrastructure security mainly is responsibility of, excuse me, the provider, and the customer will focus on the core business, the app security. So that will take a lot of burden and time consuming to become a resilient organization. And of course, the encryption tools, the access control, the cloud is providing. Plus, they have the customers own the public encryption keys. The key, the encryption keys is with the customer, not with the provider, so that you feel that you own and secure, you have full control over your data in terms of access, in terms of security. So that's how if you ask me what's the best way is to go digital transformation cybersecurity. That's much faster, easier, less cost, and easy to sustain, because the tools of the clouds are helping a lot instead of doing a local investment on premise. So that's, in a nutshell, what I would put it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. And now let's hear from Majid Abar.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an amazing question, but it's very difficult to nail down or to give a certain number. And it also depends on the business, whether it's a new business that is using conventional budgeting approaches versus, that's based on instant need and, previous experience, versus if you're looking at a risk-based approach, right? Kind of understanding what's happened, what risks you have. So I want to thank Mr. Mohammed Al-Toura for bringing this up, because this is very important to note that when you're going to the cloud, for example, as mentioned, the responsibility becomes shared with the majority of it on the provider. Now, the customer still has some responsibility that they need to maintain, but overall, a large portion of that budget is now taken over by the cloud provider. So as an example, at Microsoft, we spend annually $1 billion in security research. This is not the cybersecurity plan for Microsoft. This is the security research. And so, when you think about it, that means each enterprise that is using the cloud now has this full, 3,500 dedicated security experts behind them to ensure their security. Now, from a budgeting perspective, if, when we've just kind of take a look, it could go anywhere between 2% to 11%. So based on studies and so on, and that will depend also on the industry itself. I think, FSI, the finance, the fintech is around 7%. But again, these are hard to pin down into actual numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Majid. Now, Ayed, would you like to respond to this question?
Sure. So all the answers are amazing so far. Now, I would answer the question from different perspectives. So the first one is, It differs from one industry to another. So the more regulated the industry, the higher the cost they will pay in case they have a breach. So this way, they need to start with a risk assessment exercise in order to identify the business data, put a value to the data, to the assets, and after that, they will be able to quantify how much it might cost them if they lost the data. So this way, they will be able to justify the cost of investing in data loss prevention technologies, threat prevention technologies that will protect the data inside the organization. Now, Mr. Mohammed also talked about the public cloud. Now, definitely with the digital transformation projects and the pandemic forced many organizations around the world to move to cloud. And we have different flavors of cloud, from SaaS to PaaS to IaaS. So the user's responsibility or the customer's responsibilities differs. So if it's SaaS, they need to take care of the application security, the data security, and users. If they go up to PaaS or IaaS, the responsibility increases. And no matter what the provider is investing in, the users need to have some sort of controls to protect the data from classifications, to monitor the email traffic, the data that are being submitted online, shared between organizations and customers or end users. So this is one angle. Now, the other one is most of the breaches that we witnessed lately are around ransomware. So hackers, they know the value of the data to customers. And now we started to see new trends where they are moving from double extortion to triple extortion, where they are not only stealing the data and asking the organization to pay the ransom, they are contacting the end users themselves and asking them to pay a portion of the ransom in order to not leak it online. And this increases the pressure on organizations to pay, to invest more in protecting their infrastructure, to protect the data, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. So the main point here is organizations, they need to know where the data is stored by doing a data classification process, which is a continuous journey. Then they implement whatever controls they have, such as the traditional DLP technologies or behavioral analytics that will look into anomalies where customers are discovering some data leaving the network after 5 p.m. So they need to invest in different types of technologies, the conventional ones like DLBs, all the way to machine learning based and behavioral analytics technologies that have use cases when it comes to protecting data.
Thank you, Mr. Ayed. Now, finally, for this question, not finally, fifth, let's have Faisal Al-Ali.
Thank you for all the answers. They're all interesting. I do agree that we cannot narrow it to a percentage because, as Mr. Ayed says and the other guys, that it depends on the environment and the business industry. But having an idea how to protect the data, or what is the critical data that you have in order to protect it, who have access to this data is really important, because in case there is any loss of data or any breach, at least you can go back and know that these guys have the access to this data. It helps with the investigation afterwards. But also we have to keep in mind that there are laws within countries. Not every country can put their data on cloud. For example, I heard in Saudi, some data or customer data has to be within the country. And for example, if we all, I'm a guy who likes the hybrid mode, not a fully cloud, not fully on-prem, just to make sure that you have a copy of your data also on-prem, just in case you lose, because we're talking about availability here, not only the data loss. So the availability of the data is also important. So having the data only on a cloud platform, I don't really agree into that approach fully, because I've seen scenarios where people in some countries lost connectivity to the internet and they wouldn't be able to access the data on the cloud. Because that's what I'm saying. It depends on the region you're in. If you're in Africa or you're in the Middle East or in the US, there's going to be a little bit difference in there. But going back to the regulations, what happens if, for example, a country goes and put most of the data on a cloud, and then the country issues a new law saying that any customer data should be within the country itself. That will cost even more money to bring the data back from the cloud back into servers. So we have to pay a close attention to what the country laws are in order to go with it. So going back to the main question, I don't think we can narrow it down to a specific percentage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Faisal. And now finally for this question, let's hear from Mr. Alan Sanchez from Fortinet.
I would like to suggest an approach to answer to this crucial and very important question rather than a number, although I agree with the order of magnitude of the number that Mr. Abba has mentioned earlier. I think that there's a need for a dialogue to properly answering that questions between the financial and economical culture of any given company and the technological IT and cybersecurity part. And the way to bridge these two worlds, I suggest we all speak the same language, and this language would be the language of risk. A risk is nothing more than the probability of occurrence of an incident times the cost of this incident. You can make it very complex, many contributions, you can slice it in many ways, but at the end of the day, the principle remains the same. The good thing about this approach is that the need to answer to these questions requires a dialogue between the marketing, the finance, the sales, the top executives, IT, and security. And the dialogue that is open here is as important as the final number itself that will vary, as it was beautifully said by all the panelists before. But as you do that, you realize that in order to know how many times these incidents could occur, you need to speak with the people in charge of operations, of products, of legal. And that participates to breaking up the silo between business, technology, production, etc. And as you go about speaking the language of risk, you have scenarios of risks. Scenario one is investment one leads to risk number one, that leads to investment number one. And altogether, we may decide to go higher in the investment, lower in the risk, or vice versa. As a management team, we may decide that we are willing to take that level of risk. Hence, we are willing to make only this level of investment. And I advise the cybersecurity officers to not to make the decision, but to present the scenarios to the fellow executives of their company and their partners and their clients, so that everybody has his voice to the sign off. And we all agree that we want to go at this level of risk with that level of investment. And if all of a sudden we realize, because we are human, estimating, we underestimate the price, we can always, as a team, revise the scenario, make a higher investment, but we all know consciously that we are making a collective decision to design, architect, and deploy our cyber security. So that's the methodology I would suggest we would take, rather than saying this is the ideal number of investment.
Thank you so much, Alan. Now, because of shortness of time and because our panelists have really touched on many of the other questions that I had prepared in advance, I'm going to go now to the question that probably is weighing very heavily on people's minds. When we see the breaches, such as the Colonial pipeline shutdown caused by ransomware, And when we see a breach, such as the one that we call the SolarWinds supply chain breach, it causes us to feel very insecure and powerless. We think, well, if these very big companies that are specialized in cybersecurity and partnering with the US government in cybersecurity, if they can be breached, what hope do we have? So let's talk for a few minutes in this next round of the panel. Let's talk about how we protect ourselves. What hope do we have of protecting ourselves? Or do we have to assume that we will be breached? And if so, what is our response? Keeping our focus on data loss protection, data loss prevention. Let's have a round with the panelists, starting with Majid Aber this time.
Yes, thank you. I mean, you hit the nail on the head here with the, not if we have a breach, but when we have a breach. So at Microsoft, we follow the zero trust policy in that it's not a matter of when you're going to be breached, but if you're going to be breached, but when. And what counts is how do you detect it, and then how do you recover from it? This is very important. Now, specifically in the case of the SolarWinds, the malware was introduced in March 2020 and was not detected till around December. So it's just sitting there, it's learning the system. And what they did is they managed to subvert the build environment. This is where you take the source code and convert it into an executable. And so it managed to replace the source code with files that are infected. Now, the idea is, how do you get around the security team and their reviews and so on? So all of the normal steps that would be taken would not catch it. For example, if you're looking for only signed versions of the files, well, this one is a signed version as well. If you're looking for, making sure you update your software to the latest version, this will not help either, because even the updated one has now the subverted file in there. You have to be able to monitor, to look at everything that is happening in there. And so the idea is, you really can, when you get into state cyber attacks similar to this, it is difficult for an organization to be able to stand to that. And this is why there is absolutely needs to be a more global response to this. So when you look at, what can be done in terms of first sharing the analysis of these threats, this needs to be the first step taken. Need to strengthen the international rules on putting these attackers, basically ensuring that there are laws to deal with them, and be able to take much stronger steps towards them. But the issue again is to be able to have safe development environments to begin with, to try and subvert that from the beginning.
Thank you so much, Majid. Next, let's hear from Ayed Al-Karta regarding the same question.
Yeah, Dana, this is a great question. Now, SolarWinds is an example. It's a textbook example of how nation-state actors can elevate the game by introducing legitimate looking code into the development environment of a company which has almost like more than 30,000 customers, according to the information on their website. Now, to deal with such a supply chain attack, we cannot rely on conventional security and old school ways or methodologies to deal with such type of attacks. This is not like a typical malware that waits for the next malware antivirus signature update and you will be protected. This is a type of attack where the adversaries were sitting inside the network for months, doing reconnaissance and intelligence collection and avoiding detection. Now, to deal with such type of problems, we need to start with changing the game rules, changing the rules of engagement here. By if they are waiting inside the network. They are doing lateral movement and living off the land tactics. We need to make sure our environment is hardened enough. We have to increase visibility. We have to rely on threat hunting and zero trust model to make sure the excessive trust that is given to such type of tools is limited and controlled, because a network management tool such the Orion is very risky if it's being abused by an adversary, because it has access to every single network device that it's managing, not to forget the abuse of the powerful system account that is being used to access those remote systems for monitoring and configuration. So if you are asking me what's the answer here, the answer is, first, any organization, whether you are developing code or you are a consumer of products, you need to have a supply chain cybersecurity strategy. So if you are consuming open source tools, you need to look into the way how these tools are being developed, what are the embedded libraries and tools that are being developed by third parties and fourth parties. If you are a consumer, you need to have a zero trust to make sure those network management tools are being isolated in a way that even in a what-if scenario, they got compromised, they cannot reach to the crown jewels, they cannot reach to Active Directory, they cannot abuse and allow the adversaries to develop further steps into the kill chain. Now, moving up is to have visibility inside the network. Now, if we look into the forensics reports of the SolarWinds attack, for any forensics or instant responder, he can easily tell you there are many ways that you can monitor for the abuse of such tools, the lateral movement, the contacting suspicious domains that should not be contacted in the first place. So there are some basics that needs to be implemented, and there are some innovative strategies that must be implemented, such as zero trust, micro-segmentation inside the network, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. You cannot just rely on macro-segmentation. It has to go down to the micro level where you limit the traffic between systems. And if there is any adversary, any heavy element in the network, it can be, he or she can be easily exposed by the SOC, since they are monitoring for anomalies inside the environment.
Thank you very much, Ayad. And now let's go to Faisal Al-Ali on this question of what hope is there for us and how do we protect ourselves?
All right. So what are we protecting here? We're protecting the data. That is the most important. So I would follow a methodology of assess and classify first. We assess, we understand where is the critical data located. Then we classify it. And after that, we apply encryption and masking. Encryption and masking is really important, because even though, as we all agree, that we will get breached, it's a matter of time. Maybe not today, maybe next year, maybe the year after. So what we want to do here is to make it hard for the hacker to extract the data. So we encrypt it. Even if he extracted from the database and he pulls all the data, he will find a hard time decrypting this data if we follow a good methodology in encryption and follow the standards, the international standards. So I would recommend that we encrypt the critical data, and masking is also a great tool, so that whatever happens, I mean, I've seen an example 2 years ago, back in 2019, there was an auditing firm, I don't want to mention the name, they got hacked. And basically everybody's data was with this auditing firm. I mean, the data is really critical. I mean, these guys asked for like the etc password of the server. They took the hashes of the users because they want to do their auditing. So one thing we can do is limit the data that we share to external parties. Let's filter whatever data we have before we share it to any third party. Let's not give it like a giveaway, like a gift for the hacker to go. So I would again recommend encryption. Encryption is a great tool. It protects all the data, even if it was breached. But unfortunately, lots of the firms here, they don't follow encryption. And because they want to make life easier, because they want the applications to go faster. I know encryption makes things slower, but come on, guys, it does the job. when you encrypt the data, nobody can extract it. Or they can, but you give them a really hard time doing so. That's my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Faisal. And next, let's go to Alan on the same subject. How do we protect our data in this scary environment?
Thank you, Dana. There is a very large spectrum of attacks going on every millisecond of every day. And in this spectrum, you have very sophisticated attacks, like some of the ones we described, and attacks that leverage very basic cybersecurity rules that are not implemented. Not encrypting the data, as Mr. Faisal just said, is one of these basic mistakes that I see too much every day. So let me give you an idea of how we can address the very basic and how we are addressing the very sophisticated. The very basics can be dealt with through education. When you educate your people, whether they are IT people or not at all IT people, you are doing our world and your company a great service. You are raising the average level of cybersecurity. You are making all the steps you're taking, including more expensive encryption, like Faisal was saying, but also a strong authentication with many different rules for passwords, etc. So educating is great. And by the way, when you educate your people to cybersecurity, you may give them a job for a lifetime. Let me remind you that there are 4.5 million jobs open in cybersecurity around the world. The budget is here. The will to recruit is here. We just can't find the people. So when you educate people, if they want, they will have a passionate job for a lifetime. And I'm very proud to say, with other people on this call, that we have opened for free an education platform. We don't monetize that have so far trained 500,000 cybersecurity officers around the world. It's called Network Security Expert, NSE. Check it in. It's free. It's for you guys, for your teams to learn. And it's not a disguised brochure about Fortinet. They are genuine knowledge that we can all benefit from. At the other end of the spectrum, you have very sophisticated attacks that take advantage of vulnerabilities of latest issued operating systems. So for that, we use the 8 millions of firewall that we have installed around the world, and we learn from every single attempt of attack on it. It's like someone tries to break in one of the doors of one of your residents around the world, and the way that has been used, whether successful or unsuccessful, gets into a knowledge database, helped by machine learning, powerful algorithms, and we learn from the way the burglar has attempted or has succeeded to go. And we make this public as well. We share this knowledge with our colleagues, customers, partners, and governments with whom we partner with. And I'm very glad to say that the government of Kuwait is one of the most advanced, open to this sort of knowledge around the world, together with the United States. And every time someone tries to break in, we learn. Every time someone succeeds, we learn. Every time someone fails, we learn. And this is how, should we be scared? I think we should be vigilant, we should be humble, but at the same time, think of all these brains, all these machines, all this knowledge. And it is a race, it is a journey. Actually, when a hacker invents a new technology to attack us, he's doing the entire world a great service, because it forces us to be better. And that is the endless race. Think of it as a journey, and there's not an end point, there's not zero or it's not binary. Our world is digital, but the solution is not binary.
Oh, thank you very much, Alan. And now let's go to Mr. Vivek. It's, I think, quite a good piece of luck, or just accidentally useful to us, that we will now end the answers to this question and come to the end of the panel by hearing from Mr. Vivek from U.S. Embassy, and then quite appropriately, we will hear from Mr. Mohammed Altura from Citra. So Mr. Vivek, can you give us a few words about how to stay safe in this very risky, high-risk environment?
Certainly, certainly. Actually, I was quite fascinated with the range of responses that the previous speakers had, and it was very, very instructive for me. So I can't really top that. I think each person, each panelist had an element of something that struck me. That is something that I was toying with when I saw the question, and I think beginning from if not when, but how quickly is it going to happen? I mean, it's a race, as Alan correctly pointed out. We are going to get hacked. Our supply chains are going to be breached. All those things are going to happen. I think as a representative of the U.S. government, I think what I was more focusing on, especially after the SolarWinds, is how quickly the solutions came about and how quickly we were able to manage disseminating those to not only within the United States, but across the world. And I think that is something that we did. So again, it's also not only focusing on how to protect data and how to keep the hackers away or just expect the unexpected, but it's also what steps and how quickly one takes the mitigating steps. And I think that is important. I think someone before in the panel said, sharing information, learning from mistakes, actually becoming better at every stage is an equally important thing that organizations can do. So I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to stop there and let Mohammed take over and provide the finishing thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vivek. And I do think it's just perfect, Mohammed, that you can wrap things up for us. And I'd like to give you a question from the chat, which fits in very well with this question of how do we protect ourselves. The question is, are there any statistics for the cybersecurity breaches in Kuwait specifically? Do we have any statistics on data loss in Kuwait specifically, meaning the organizations in Kuwait? I also heard comments about this in the Kuwait University Summit today. So Mohammed, as you respond to us and tell us how to stay safe in this high-risk environment, could you also answer that question about the availability of statistics pertaining to Kuwait?
Sure. The collective notion is important to stay safe, whereby we always have to be transparent. So when any organization gets an attack, they have to share this information to the stakeholders, and we make sure that we have a very quick information sharing platform that's always fly this news to the critical national agencies. And we make sure also that we have a response team for that, as an organization. It doesn't have to be employees in the organization. It can be also a contractual basis with companies that can help to do skill transfer, can help to put a process in the organization to help them to do the quick incident response to fix the issues. Information is power. The more we're transparent, the stronger we are. In Kuwait, because there is yet no regulation to force people, an organization to become transparent, of course, by human nature, nobody would say that we are attacked, because that can hurt their company or agency reputation. But in the meantime, it can hurt others as well. Uh, so, it's very important that we always become transparent when we get attacked. If we don't, we make the attackers stronger. So that's, of course, and the human development, the capacity development of the people in this business has to be ongoing developed, because it's a race. And you'll always find in many areas that the attackers are head of the attackees. So that's very important that we keep going into developing the human capacity in the space, and make sure that we started from the academia level to make it faster for the nation. And the other question, which is statistics, well, when you have no regulation to enforce organization to become transparent, there is no way that you can collect such incidents accurately, because those incidents happen differently in a different environments, and coming from different attacking points. So as long as we don't have a full transparency across the spectrum, where we can be open and everyone shares their statistics individually, so that we can come up with a big picture of what's happening in Kuwait. I don't see, not only Kuwait, but any government will have a very difficult time to determine those statistics. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Yes, there's no doubt about it. So much work to do on this subject in IT and cybersecurity. And I'm sure that I'm speaking for everyone here when we offer to you our support. And please let us know anything that we can do to support you and to support data protection in Kuwait. Thank you to the panel. It was really amazing. Honestly, I am a specialist in this area, but I found every response to be meaningful, thoughtful, and full of good information, useful information. So this meeting was recorded. I think that if you really need the information in this meeting, you could listen to it again and get much more out of it on the second listening. And now I'd like to hand back to Frank, our president of the AmCham Kuwait, to close the meeting.
Thank you, Dana. I want to echo what Dana said. I was amazed by all of the diverse answers that were given to all of the questions. There was just an enormous amount of information that was put out in such a short period of time. And as somebody that is not a specialist in cybersecurity, it was quite eye-opening experience. And I think a lot of people will benefit from this, not just those that are participating today, but as Dana said, this is recorded. And I know a lot of people are going to come back and view all of this again. I really like the discussion about the ecosystem, but when, my little jab at all of that is we're all the ecosystem, because we're all interconnected today. So there's an individual responsibility, a corporate responsibility, national responsibility, but it's everyone's responsibility, just as was pointed out. I want to thank all of the panelists very, very much for a very informative session. I appreciate it all very much. I thank the U.S. Embassy. Vivek, thank you for being with us today. And Citra, of course, thank you very, very much for being with us today, Mohammed. It's great to see you. I want to thank all of you that participated with us today. I want to thank everybody that is not here today, but will be watching this videos again in the future. Thank you for your involvement with ABCK. Please join the focus group on IT, because there's a lot of information. We could have just kept going on for hours on this, and it's invaluable to everybody. So thank you all very, very much. I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful evening, and thank you again for participating. On behalf of AmCham Kuwait, thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you.